A barefoot, starving street girl knelt on the frozen Chicago sidewalk, her small hands shaking as she drew with broken pieces of chalk. The brutal wind off Lake Michigan tore at her torn dress, while Vinny Moretti, the untouchable Mafia king of the Midwest, stepped out of his armored black SUV and stopped dead in his tracks. There, glowing under the flickering streetlight, was the hauntingly perfect portrait of his murdered daughter Sophie, the smiling face with pigtails he had not seen in 10 agonizing years. Then she did something no one expected. Without hesitation, without a single word, the ragged little girl looked straight into the eyes of one of the most dangerous men in America and whispered softly, "This is my heaven sister. Mommy says I look just like her. Not for coins, not for food, not for mercy." She drew with every ounce of innocent love she still carried just to keep her lost sister alive in colors on cold concrete. What happened in the next few heart-stopping minutes would explode Vinny Moretti's world of blood and power, tear open wounds that had never healed, ignite a violent storm of paternal love and crushing remorse, and forever change the lives of a mafia boss, a desperate mother, and 2 broken little 7. Girls, if this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the quiet power of kindness, especially when no one else chooses to show it. Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Which city and country are you in, and what time is it there right now? It's always amazing to see how stories like this connect people from all over the world. Is it United States, London, maybe Canada, Jamaica, South Africa, or anywhere we want to know? And tell us what you learned at the end of this video. If moments like this remind you of the beauty of humanity, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more powerful stories that celebrate compassion, courage, and the simple acts of kindness that can change a life. Vinny Moretti stood on the sweeping second-floor balcony of his Gold Coast mansion, the icy Chicago wind cutting across the lake like a blade. The city lights stretched below him in a glittering sea, but none of their warmth reached the man known across the Midwest as the untouchable king of the underground. At 42 years old, fair-skinned with sharp features hardened by years of calculated power, Vinny had built an empire that commanded respect and fear in equal measure. Real estate fronts, shipping docks, and silent investments all flowed through his hands. Yet inside his chest, everything felt hollow. 10 years earlier, a rival car bomb had ripped away his wife and young daughter Sophie in a single merciless instant. The explosion still echoed in his nightmares. His surviving son Tommy, now 12, had grown quiet and angry, retreating into silence that mirrored his father's own emotional exile. Vinny buried the pain beneath layers of control, but the guilt gnawed at him relentlessly. I should have protected them. I failed them. The thought circled like a vulture, tearing at his conscience during every quiet moment. Later that night, unable to sleep, Vinny left the mansion in his armored black SUV. He told his driver he needed air, but the truth was simpler. The walls of his fortress had begun to suffocate him. The vehicle cruised south toward neighborhoods most men in his position avoided after dark. The contrast struck him immediately. Here the streets were cracked and unforgiving. Graffiti scarred brick walls. Streetlights flickered weakly over huddled figures wrapped in threadbare blankets. On a dimly lit corner near an abandoned lot, Vinny's eyes caught a small figure kneeling on the concrete. A barefoot girl, no older than 8, her thin dress torn at the hem, was drawing with broken pieces of chalk. The portrait was hauntingly lifelike, a smiling little girl with pigtails. Sophie. Vinny's breath caught. He ordered the driver to stop. The girl looked up, startled. Her name was Lily. Her mother, Sarah Thompson, stood a few feet away, clutching a worn grocery bag that held the day's only meal, 2 stale rolls and a small carton of milk. Sarah was 32, once pretty, but now gaunt from years of desperate survival. Her clothes hung loosely on her malnourished frame. Dark circles shadowed her eyes from countless sleepless nights spent guarding Lily from the cold and from dangers no child should witness. She had lost her job months ago when the diner closed. Eviction notices had piled up until the landlord changed the locks. For weeks they had lived on the streets, moving from shelter to alley to park bench when the wind howled off Lake Michigan. Sarah stepped protectively in front of Lily, her voice soft and timid. "Please, sir, we're not bothering anyone. She just likes to draw." Her hands trembled. She was desperate, powerless, and deeply aware of how pitiful they must look to a man stepping out of such an expensive vehicle. Vinny felt something crack inside him. The girl's drawing, the mother's exhausted dignity, the raw contrast between his heated leather seats and their freezing sidewalk existence, it all collided. He handed Sarah several bills, more than she had seen in months. Get the child something warm to eat. And shoes. His voice was steady, but inside a storm raged. Why does this hurt so much? Why does a stranger's child remind me of everything I lost? Sarah hesitated, confusion and fear flickering across her face. She accepted the money with downcast eyes, murmuring a polite, "Thank you, sir," yet her mind spun with suspicion. Powerful men did not help women like her without expecting something in return. Still, Lily's hungry eyes made her accept. They walked quickly to the nearest 24-hour diner, where the warmth brought color back to Lily's cheeks for the first time in days. Next morning, Sarah woke with Lily curled against her on a thin blanket in an underpass. The money had bought one hot meal and a pair of second-hand sneakers, but reality returned swiftly. A store owner chased them away when Lily tried to draw on the sidewalk outside. Passersby looked through them as if they were invisible. Humiliation burned in Sarah's chest. She had once dreamed of giving Lily a real childhood, not this endless cycle of hunger and fear. Now she felt herself breaking. Weeks later, Vinny found himself driving the same route again. Something pulled him back. He spotted Sarah and Lily near the same corner. This time, a group of aggressive men from a rival faction had surrounded them, demanding protection money from people who clearly had nothing. Vinny's jaw tightened. He stepped out, his presence alone, shifting the air. The men recognized him. Tense words were exchanged. One reached for something in his jacket, but Vinny's calm authority and the visible silhouette of his security detail forced them to back down. The confrontation ended without bloodshed, yet the message was clear: these two were now under his watch. Sarah watched the scene in shock. Her heart pounded with a confusing mix of terror and overwhelming curiosity. Who was this man? Why would someone like him intervene? Dizziness washed over her as adrenaline faded. She steadied herself against a lamppost, numbness spreading through her limbs. Lily clutched her mother's hand, eyes wide. Vinny approached slowly. "You shouldn't be out here." His tone carried authority, softened by something deeper. When Sarah looked up, their eyes met. In that instant, an intense protective surge flooded Vinny's chest. Not romance, not desire. A fierce paternal instinct ignited, as if fate had placed this broken little family in his path to atone for the one he had failed. This child. She draws like Sophie. This mother fights like a lioness with nothing left. The remorse he carried for years roared louder than ever. Guilt over Sophie twisted violently with a new burning responsibility. Sarah felt disoriented, her mind reeling. One moment she was bracing for another cruel night, the next a powerful stranger was offering safety. Fear and hope warred inside her. "Why are you helping us?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper, polite yet guarded. Tears she had held back for months threatened to fall. Vinny did not answer with grand promises. Instead, he arranged for them to be taken to a safe apartment he controlled, stocked with warm clothes, food, and medical supplies. As the SUV carried them away from the streets, Sarah held Lily tightly. The little girl whispered, "Mommy, he looks sad like us." Sarah's heart ached with 1,000 conflicting emotions, gratitude mixed with deep suspicion, relief, battling lingering terror of what this protection might cost. Inside the mansion later that night, Vinny stood once more on the balcony. Tommy had joined him silently. The boy's quiet presence reminded Vinny of all the years he had been emotionally absent. Seeing Sarah's desperate struggle and Lily's innocent resilience had torn open old wounds. The inner conflict raged. "I destroy lives to protect my empire. How can I protect this one without destroying it too?" Violent remorse clawed at him. He had ordered actions in the past that brought pain to innocent families. Now the image of Lily drawing Sophie's face refused to leave him. Days blurred. Vinny arranged discreet medical care for Sarah, who had been fighting untreated exhaustion and malnutrition. He watched from afar as Lily explored the temporary apartment with wide-eyed wonder, drawing colorful pictures on paper instead of cold sidewalks. Each small moment chipped away at the ice around his heart. Yet danger loomed. Rival factions, sensing any softness in Vinny, began testing boundaries with bolder street encounters. One evening, as Sarah and Lily were being moved to more secure housing, another confrontation erupted. Men blocked the street, shouting threats. Vinny arrived personally. Tension crackled in the cold air as words turned sharp. He stood firm, shielding the vehicle with his body, his voice low and commanding. The rivals retreated, but the message was sent. War was brewing. Back at the mansion, Vinny paced his study. The guilt was consuming. Sophie would be Lily's age now. The thought brought him to his knees in the quiet room. Tears he had not allowed himself in years finally came. In that condensed stillness, he made a silent vow. He would protect this mother and child, not out of pity, but because something in their resilience had awakened the father he thought had died with Sophie. Sarah, settling into the safe apartment with Lily asleep beside her, stared at the warm walls. Confusion and fear still lingered, but so did a fragile spark of hope. She did not yet understand the powerful man's motives, but for the first time in years she felt seen. The gap between their worlds was vast, Yet in that vastness, an unexpected bridge of compassion had formed. The empire of shadows around Vinny Moretti had begun to shift. Grief still haunted him, but a new purpose burned brighter to shield this vulnerable woman and her daughter from the same darkness that had taken his own family. The inner turmoil only grew stronger, pulling the powerful Mafia boss toward a path of redemption he never expected to walk. Later that night, after the first unexpected act of kindness, Sarah Thompson sat on the edge of a narrow motel bed paid for with the stranger's money, watching Lily sleep. The child's small chest rose and fell in exhausted peace, the new sneakers placed carefully beside her like fragile treasures. Sarah's own body ached from weeks of sleeping on concrete, but her mind refused rest. The powerful man's face lingered in her thoughts. Why had he helped them? No one in her world ever did anything without a price. Suspicion coiled tight in her stomach, mixing with a fragile thread of gratitude that felt almost dangerous to hold. Next morning, the city woke under a gray Chicago sky heavy with coming snow. Sarah guided Lily back toward the familiar corner where the child loved to draw, hoping the morning light might bring a few more coins from passers-by. Hunger gnawed at them both. Sarah's thin coat offered little protection against the biting wind that whipped off the lake, cutting through her like invisible knives. Her cheeks were sunken, her once bright eyes dulled by constant survival. Lily's small hand trembled in hers, the girl's lips chapped and pale. They had eaten only half a banana split between them since the previous night's warm meal. As they approached the sidewalk, an absurdly unfair scene unfolded. A city worker in an orange vest was already power washing the pavement, erasing Lily's earlier chalk drawings in brutal, indifferent sweeps. The colorful image of the smiling girl vanished under jets of water, leaving only wet streaks. Lily froze, a soft cry escaping her. Sarah dropped to her knees beside her daughter, pulling the child close. "It's okay, baby. We can draw again," she whispered, her voice soft and timid, though inside her heart shattered. The casual destruction of something so innocent felt like another cruel reminder of how little their lives mattered. Tears stung Sarah's eyes, but she blinked them back, too proud and too broken to let strangers see her fully crumble. From across the street, Vinny Moretti watched the entire moment from inside his idling SUV. He had told himself he was only checking on them, ensuring the cash had been used wisely. But the truth tore deeper. Seeing the mother and child stripped of even that small joy reignited the violent remorse that had kept him awake. Sophie would have drawn on sidewalks too. I would have laughed and taken pictures. The guilt twisted like a blade in his chest, sharper now because these two strangers had somehow become a mirror to his failure. He stepped out, his tailored wool coat contrasting brutally with the ragged scene before him. At that exact moment, trouble arrived from the opposite direction. 3 men from a rival Southside crew, faces hardened by old grudges, spotted Sarah and Lily. They moved in with predatory confidence, one of them kicking over Sarah's small bag of belongings. "This block costs. Pay up or move," the leader snarled. Sarah instinctively shielded Lily, her body shaking with fresh horror and anxiety. She had nothing left to give. The unfairness of it burned after everything they had already endured, another blow when they were already on their knees. Vinny crossed the street in long strides, his presence shifting the air like a storm front. The rivals recognized him immediately. Tension crackled in the cold morning light. Words flew sharp and low. One man reached toward his waistband, but Vinny's calm, commanding gaze and the subtle movement of his security team 2 cars back forced them to hesitate. No blows were exchanged yet. The confrontation carried the weight of unspoken threats. The rivals backed away with muttered curses, shooting poisonous glances over their shoulders. Vinny had bought them time, but the message was clear: the streets were watching. Sarah looked up at him, her legs unsteady. A wave of dizziness swept through her, numbness spreading from her fingertips as shock collided with overwhelming curiosity. This was the same man, tall, fair-skinned, radiating quiet power that made the world bend. "You again," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, polite and guarded even as fear and confusion battled inside her. "I don't understand why you keep coming back." Vinny knelt to Lily's level, his expensive leather shoes brushing the damp sidewalk. The little girl stared at him with wide, innocent eyes. "You came back for us?" Lily asked, her small voice cutting straight through his defenses. In that instant, something fierce and paternal ignited in Vinny's heart, an overwhelming surge of protective love so intense it nearly stole his breath. Not for the mother in a romantic sense, but for this fragile child who reminded him so painfully of Sophie. "She draws her lost sister the way I still see mine in every shadow." The remorse that lived in him roared louder, a violent inner conflict between the ruthless empire he had built and the father he had buried 10 years ago. He helped Sarah to her feet with gentle strength, his hand steady on her arm. She felt the warmth of real care for the first time in years, and nearly lost her balance from the emotional shock. Her mind spun in disorientation. How could a man who clearly commanded fear also offer such tenderness? The contrast left her heart tearing in new directions, suspicion melting into the first fragile seeds of trust, burning with unexpected intensity. Later that afternoon, Vinny arranged for them to be driven to a small, clean apartment in a safer neighborhood he controlled. As the car moved through the city, Sarah watched the glittering skyline give way to quieter streets lined with brownstones. Inside the vehicle, the heated seats and soft leather felt like another world compared to the freezing nights they had survived. Lily pressed her face to the window, whispering in wonder. Sarah held her daughter close, her thin frame still trembling. The absurdity of their situation clawed at her, one moment scrubbing for survival on the streets, the next being ushered into safety by a man whose very aura spoke of untouchable wealth and hidden power. Weeks later, the encounters continued in quiet, unexpected ways. Vinny would appear during moments of fresh hardship, an eviction attempt on another family in their temporary building, a sudden cutoff of city assistance that left Sarah and Lily without heat on the coldest night yet. Each time he intervened with calm authority, resolving conflicts with rival influences that tried to exploit the vulnerable. One evening, as snow began to fall, Sarah stood outside the apartment building, arguing with a landlord who demanded extra payments she could not afford. The man's cruel words cut deep, humiliating her in front of Lily. Sarah's voice remained soft and polite, even as inner torment threatened to overwhelm her. "Please, sir, we have nowhere else." Vinny arrived like a shadow made flesh. A tense, street-side standoff followed with the landlord's connections, bold words exchanged under the streetlights. The confrontation ended with the landlord backing down, but the emotional cost weighed heavily on Sarah. She felt profound confusion and a growing, burning attachment to this protector she barely knew. In quiet moments afterward, when Lily slept, Sarah sat alone, tears falling silently. The disparity between her utter powerlessness and Vinny's effortless control created a psychological storm-numbing gratitude mixed with deep fear of what hidden price might one day be demanded. In the stillness of his Gold Coast mansion, that same night, Vinny stood before the large portrait of Sophie that hung in his private study. Tommy lingered nearby, watching his father with guarded eyes. The boy had noticed the change in Vinny, the way he left the house more often, the haunted look that now carried something new. Vinny's inner world was being violently torn apart. The gnawing remorse for his lost family collided with this fierce new responsibility. Protecting Sarah and Lily felt like the first right thing he had done in years. Yet every act of kindness reminded him of how much blood stained his hands. "I destroy to keep power. Can I protect without destroying them too?" Sarah, back in the apartment, tucked Lily into clean sheets. The child murmured sleepily, "He's like a guardian angel, Mommy." Sarah brushed hair from her daughter's forehead, her heart swelling with a passionate, protective attachment that surprised even her. The once desperate woman felt the first real stirrings of trust, intense and overwhelming toward the powerful man who kept returning. Yet in the quiet, condensed stillness, doubt still whispered. Could someone from such a different world truly care without an agenda? The sidewalk that had first brought them together now felt like the beginning of something neither of them could yet name. For Vinny, it was the path toward redeeming the father he thought he had lost forever. For Sarah, it was the terrifying, hopeful bridge from absolute misery toward something resembling safety. And for Lily, it was simply colors on pavement turning into the possibility of a real home. The empire of shadows around Vinny continued to shift, pulled by the small, resilient hands of a child who drew lost sisters and a mother who refused to stop fighting. The inner tearing in all their hearts only grew deeper, more complex, and more impossible to ignore. Later that night, after another tense street standoff, Sarah Thompson lay awake in the modest apartment Vinny had secured for them. The walls felt too solid, the bed too soft after so many nights on unforgiving pavement. Lily slept soundly beside her small fingers, still clutching a fresh pack of colored pencils Vinny had quietly delivered. Sarah's mind refused quiet. The powerful man's interventions had grown more frequent, each one pulling her further from the edge of despair, yet deeper into a whirlwind of guarded hope. She whispered a soft prayer into the darkness, her voice timid even in solitude. "Please let this be real." Next morning, curiosity got the better of Lily, while Sarah stepped out to speak with a social worker about possible assistance. The little girl slipped away, drawn by an inexplicable pull toward the glittering Gold Coast neighborhood she had glimpsed from the car window. Clutching her chalk and a small faded locket around her neck, Lily made her way to the towering gates of Vinny's mansion. The ironwork rose like a castle wall, far grander than anything she had ever seen. She knelt on the sidewalk just beyond the gate and began drawing with fierce concentration, her tiny hands creating another portrait of the smiling girl she called her heaven sister. Hours later, Vinny returned from a tense meeting with his captains. From the balcony, he spotted the small figure at the gate. His heart clenched with fresh recognition. Before he could descend, his guards had already moved in gently, but firmly detaining the child and bringing her inside the compound. Sarah, frantic after discovering Lily missing, arrived shortly after, guided by one of Vinny's discreet men. She rushed through the gates, her thin frame trembling with horror and anxiety. "Lily, where is my baby?" Her voice cracked soft and polite, even in panic, though inside she felt the familiar numbness of impending loss. In the marble foyer of the mansion, Lily sat on an ornate bench, unharmed but wide-eyed. Sarah dropped to her knees beside her, pulling the child close. The disparity hit like a physical blow, the warm, polished floors beneath her worn shoes, the crystal chandelier overhead casting light on her malnourished arms, the quiet luxury that made their previous life seem like a cruel joke. An absurdly unfair wave of humiliation washed over Sarah. How many times had she begged for scraps, while places like this existed untouched? Vinny entered the room, his presence commanding yet strangely gentle. "She's safe," he said, his voice low. But as he looked closer at Lily, something shifted in his expression. The child reached for her locket, opening it with small fingers. Inside was a faded photograph of a young woman, and tucked behind it an old image of Vinny himself from years earlier, taken during a brief forgotten chapter of his life before his marriage. Lily explained innocently, "Mommy says this is my real daddy's picture. She kept it so I would know I wasn't alone." The words struck Vinny like a silent explosion. Time seemed to slow. He stared at the locket, then at Lily's features, the shape of her eyes, the tilt of her smile, echoes of a past he had buried. Urgent but discreet arrangements were made. Samples were taken and tested through private channels only a man of his power could access. The results came back swiftly, confirming what his heart had already begun to suspect. Lily was his biological daughter, conceived in a short relationship long before Sophie's birth. The revelation tore through Vinny with violent intensity. Gnawing remorse surged forward, sharper than any guilt he had carried before. All these years of loss, and another child of mine has been suffering in the cold. His inner world fractured. The ruthless Mafia boss who had ordered countless calculated moves now felt his knees weaken in the quiet foyer. He steadied himself against a column, breathing through the storm of paternal love and crushing self-reproach. Sarah watched him, confusion blooming into shock. Her legs buckled slightly as dizziness swept over her. She reached for the wall, numbness spreading through her body. What are you saying?" she whispered, her voice timid and disoriented. The idea that this powerful stranger was connected to them by blood left her mind reeling. Once desperately poor and invisible, she now stood in a mansion, facing the possibility that her daughter belonged to this world of wealth and hidden danger. Fear and a burning, overwhelming attachment collided inside her. Trust, once fragile, now surged with passionate intensity. Yet horror followed close behind. What did this mean for their safety? Before anyone could process the truth, danger erupted without warning. Later that afternoon, as shadows lengthened across the estate, a rival faction launched a bold strike. Multiple vehicles screeched to a halt outside the gates. Men spilled out, their intent clear in the way they moved. They had learned of Vinny's recent softness, his unexplained protection of a street woman and child, and saw it as weakness to exploit. Gunfire cracked in controlled bursts, shattering the peaceful facade. No gratuitous bloodshed, but the ambush carried raw menace. Chaos engulfed the compound. Vinny shouted orders, shielding Sarah and Lily behind heavy furniture. In the confusion, a stray shot grazed his shoulder, sending him staggering. Blood stained his crisp white shirt. Sarah's heart hammered with fresh terror. She felt deep disorientation, her vision blurring at the edges, yet something stronger than fear propelled her forward. Lily, brave beyond her years, tugged at Vinny's arm. "We have to move like in the stories," the child urged. Together, mother and daughter helped the wounded man toward a hidden service entrance in the basement. Sarah's malnourished body protested, with every step pain shooting through her limbs, but she refused to falter. The absurdity of the moment tore at her, a destitute woman who had once shivered through wind-filled nights, now guiding a powerful Mafia boss through his own fortress. Vinny leaned on them, his powerful frame heavy with shock. Inside his chest, the conflict raged fiercer than ever. "I brought this danger to them. Just like I failed Sophie." Remorse clawed violently at his soul, yet the feel of Lily's small hand in his ignited a fierce protective love that burned away some of the darkness. They emerged through an old tunnel that led to a quiet alley behind the estate. Vinny's trusted men met them there, securing the area without further escalation. In the condensed stillness of that narrow passage, Vinny looked at Sarah and Lily, his fair-skinned face pale from blood loss. "You saved me," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. Sarah met his gaze, her own eyes filled with a complex storm gratitude so intense. It hurt fear for what came next. and a deepening, soul-stirring attachment to the man who had upended their world. The once powerless mother felt seen and valued in a way that challenged every humiliating memory of begging on street corners. Weeks later, as Vinny recovered in a secure wing of the mansion, the weight of the revelation settled over all of them. Sarah sat by a large window overlooking the manicured gardens, Lily drawing quietly at her feet. The luxury around them only magnified the memory of their former poverty, the threadbare blankets, the empty stomach aches, the cruel indifference of strangers. Unjust echoes still haunted Sarah landlords who had laughed at her pleas officials who had turned away. Nights when wind howled so fiercely, she feared they would not wake. Each recollection now fueled a profound inner torment, yet also a growing trust in Vinny's protection. Vinny, bandaged and restless in his study, stared at old photographs. Tommy had joined him, the boy sensing the shift in his father. The Mafia boss's empire suddenly felt heavier. Every past decision, every rival he had confronted on shadowed streets now carried new consequences. The violent inner conflict left him breathless at times. He had spent years building walls of power to avoid pain, only to have a small girl and her resilient mother dismantle them with nothing but chalk and quiet courage. In quiet moments, Sarah would visit with Lily. Her voice remained soft and polite when addressing him, but her eyes held a new depth of attachment. "I don't know how to thank you," she said one evening, confusion and wonder mixing in her tone. Vinny simply nodded, the paternal bond, with Lily strengthening with every shared glance. He felt responsible in a way that transcended his wealth and influence. This was redemption wrapped in danger, healing wrapped in threat. The first twist had shattered old realities. Blood had spoken, danger had struck, and in the aftermath, 3 wounded hearts began slowly and painfully to find their way toward one another in the vast, glittering shadows of Chicago. Later that night, in a secure wing of the Gold Coast mansion, Vinny Moretti lay propped against silk pillows, his bandaged shoulder throbbing under the soft glow of a bedside lamp. The room smelled of polished wood and faint antiseptic, a far cry from the blood-stained tunnel they had escaped through hours earlier. Doctors he trusted implicitly had come and gone, stitching the graze and insisting on rest, but rest evaded him. The revelation that Lily was his blood tore through every defense he had built over the years. Another daughter lost to the streets while I sat behind these walls. The gnawing remorse evolved into something sharper, a relentless self-accusation that made his powerful hands clench against the sheets. Next morning, Sarah Thompson woke in an adjoining suite, sunlight filtering through heavy drapes onto floors warmer than any she had touched in years. Lily stirred beside her, the child's thin frame finally relaxed in a bed large enough for 3. Sarah's own body still ached from malnutrition, and the night's ordeal, her arms weak from carrying Vinny's weight through the tunnel. She stood slowly, dizziness threatening again as she took in the opulent space, fresh clothes laid out in her size, a tray of warm breakfast foods untouched on a side table. The contrast humiliated her anew. Only weeks ago she had scavenged scraps from dumpsters while wind howled through alleyways, her daughter shivering against her. Now this. She touched the soft fabric of a sweater, tears welling. Confusion and a deepening attachment warred inside her, passionate and burning. This man, this stranger turned protector and father to her child, had pulled them from hell. Yet trust still felt like stepping onto cracking ice. Lily, sensing her mother's unease, slipped from the bed and took Sarah's hand. "Mommy, can we see him? He got hurt because of us." Her small voice carried innocent concern. Sarah nodded, her own voice, soft and polite, when they were led to Vinny's room. "We wanted to check on you, sir," she said, eyes downcast at first, then lifting with guarded curiosity. Vinny sat up, despite the pain, his fair-skinned face etched with exhaustion. When Lily approached and carefully placed a new drawing on his lap, a colorful scene of a family standing together under a bright sun, something inside him cracked wider. The paternal love surged with overwhelming force, fierce and protective. He reached out, resting a large hand gently on the child's head. "Thank you, little one." In that quiet, condensed stillness, Tommy entered the room hesitantly. The 12-year-old had heard fragments from the staff. Seeing Lily, his half-sister, brought a flicker of complicated emotion across his face. Vinny watched his son, the violent inner conflict intensifying. "I failed one child. I will not fail these 2. Weeks later, the mansion became a sanctuary wrapped in tension. Sarah and Lily were given permanent rooms, but whispers followed them through the halls. Vinny's consigliere, a sharp-eyed man named Russo, made his disapproval known in private meetings. "Bringing street people into the heart of the operation invites weakness," he warned. Vinny's response was cold steel, yet internally the words fed his torment. Every luxury he offered Sarah and Lily reminded him of the blood on his hands that had funded this life. One afternoon, while Sarah walked the manicured gardens with Lily, an absurdly unfair scene from their past resurfaced in memory. A social worker had once denied them emergency aid, citing insufficient documentation while they stood soaked from rain, Lily's shoes falling apart. The humiliation still burned. Sarah paused by a fountain, the sound of water soothing yet underscoring the vast gap. She had endured nights where cold wind sliced through cardboard shelters, her malnourished body too weak to even cry properly. Now, surrounded by blooming flowers and security that felt both comforting and suffocating, she felt profound disorientation. Her legs nearly gave way as gratitude and lingering fear collided. Lily tugged her toward a garden bench where Vinny sat watching from a distance. The child began drawing again, this time on large sketch paper provided by staff, creating images of Chicago streets transformed into playgrounds. Sarah sat nearby, her voice timid when addressing Vinny. She has never had paper like this. Thank you. Her words carried new layers of attachment, intense and soul-stirring, yet she remained guarded, still processing the blood truth. Later that same week, fresh danger tested the fragile peace. Vinny received word of rivals probing the neighborhood again, seeking any sign of vulnerability. He insisted on accompanying a supply run himself despite his injury. Sarah, needing medicine for Lily's lingering cough from street exposure, asked to join for fresh air. The convoy moved through South Side streets. Suddenly, at a quiet intersection, two vehicles from a rival crew boxed them in. Tension spiked in the crisp air. Bold words were shouted from rolled-down windows, accusations of Vinny going soft. No shots fired, but the confrontation stretched nerves to breaking. Vinny stepped out, partially his commanding presence, forcing the rivals to retreat after heated exchanges, but the encounter left Sarah shaken. Back in the car, she gripped the seat, numbness spreading through her chest. Horror at the violence she had narrowly escaped mixed with heightened curiosity about the world Vinny inhabited. "How do you live like this?" she whispered. Voice polite yet trembling. Vinny's remorse deepened violently during the ride home. "My choices put them in the line of fire again." The paternal bond with Lily pulled him toward change, yet his empire demanded ruthlessness. The inner tearing left him silent, staring out at passing buildings that represented both his power and his prison. In the mansion days afterward, healing wove through the tension in small, tender moments. Lily insisted on helping Vinny with his recovery, bringing drawings that depicted him as a strong guardian, and singing off-key songs she remembered from rare happy times on the streets. Tommy gradually joined these sessions, his initial wariness softening, as Lily shared stories of sidewalk life. Sarah observed from the doorway, her thin frame filling out slightly from regular meals. The wealth around her intensified the memory of past misery, sleeping in doorways with rats scurrying nearby, the sting of rejection from shelters that turned them away. Each recollection tore at her emotionally, yet Vinny's quiet protection created a burning trust that grew stronger with every shared glance. One evening, as rain pattered against tall windows, Sarah found Vinny alone in his study. Russo had just left after another tense discussion about loose ends. Vinny's face showed the strain. Sarah approached hesitantly, her voice soft. "You don't have to carry everything alone." The words surprised even her. In that condensed emotional stillness, Vinny looked at her not with romance but with profound respect and a father's gratitude for the woman who had raised his daughter through hell. His heart twisted with new conflict, the desire to shield them completely versus the reality of his dangerous world. Lily burst in, then dragging Mia, her loyal best friend from the streets whom Vinny's men had located and brought in for safety after the ambush. The tough 8-year-old girl eyed Vinny with open distrust at first. "Powerful men always hurt kids like us," Mia muttered, creating fresh tension. Lily defended him passionately, pulling her friend closer. Sarah watched the interaction, feeling another wave of shock and curiosity. Bringing another street child into this world magnified the disparity and her own past powerlessness. Vinny knelt to Mia's level despite the pain in his shoulder. "You're safe here too," he said quietly. The moment carried weight, chipping further at his hardened exterior. His remorse for all the families his business had indirectly harmed surged anew, violently clashing with the fierce love he felt for Lily and the growing responsibility toward these resilient children. As weeks turned into a careful routine, Sarah found herself in quiet moments of reflection. The once desperate mother who had endured humiliating searches for food in trash bins and nights so cold her teeth chattered uncontrollably now watched her daughter thrive. The psychological shift left her numb at times, then overwhelmed with passionate attachment to the safety Vinny provided. She remained polite and somewhat guarded in conversations, but her eyes spoke of deepening trust. Vinny, walking the halls later that night with Tommy at his side, felt the empire shifting beneath him. The healing had begun not just of bodies but of souls. Yet tension simmered Russo's warnings, echoing rivals circling. The paternal bond with Lily burned brighter than any empire, pulling him toward choices that could either save them all or destroy everything he had built. In the mansion's glowing windows, 4 wounded hearts navigated new beginnings where kindness from the broken met power wrapped in shadows, and the inner tearing promised both redemption and greater trials ahead. Later that night, after the garden bench conversation, Vinny Moretti found himself unable to stay confined to his recovery suite. The drawings Lily had left on his nightstand seemed to glow under the lamplight, pulling him toward the wide windows overlooking the estate grounds. His shoulders still ached, a dull reminder of the tunnel escape, but the quiet pull of the children's presence proved stronger than pain. He moved slowly through the halls, his powerful frame casting long shadows on marble floors that gleamed with wealth accumulated through years of calculated control. Next morning, the mansion gardens awakened under a pale Chicago sun. Lily and Mia had claimed a wide patch of lawn near the fountain, transforming the manicured space into something alive and chaotic. Colored chalk sticks scattered across the grass like fallen stars. Lily sketched enormous murals of city streets turned magical, while Mia, still wary but drawn by her friend's enthusiasm, added bold street scenes from their old South Side corners. Sarah watched from a nearby bench, her thin frame wrapped in a new cashmere cardigan that felt foreign against skin once raw from endless cold winds. The contrast struck her again, not with the old humiliation this time, but with a quiet wonder that left her almost dizzy. Only weeks earlier she had carried Lily through nights so bitter their breath froze in the air, scavenging for anything edible. Now her daughter laughed freely under blooming trees. Vinny stepped outside, drawn by the sound of giggles. Lily spotted him first and waved with both arms. "Come see our playground, Daddy." The word slipped out naturally, landing in Vinny's chest like a warm stone. He approached, lowering himself carefully onto the grass despite the protest in his shoulder. Mia eyed him sideways, her tough expression softening only slightly. "We used to draw on sidewalks so people would notice us," the girl said, her voice carrying the weight of old survival. Sarah listened, her heart twisting with fresh intensity. The memory of power-washing crews erasing their art of strangers stepping over them as if they were litter still carried a sting that made her voice catch when she spoke. "Show me how you dance to stay warm," Vinny suggested, his tone gentle, yet commanding. Lily and Mia sprang up, demonstrating exaggerated, silly movements they had invented on street corners to fight off hunger and despair. Their laughter rang out bright and unrestrained. Vinny watched, a rare smile tugging at his lips. The sound forced something loose inside him, a crack in the armor of remorse that had weighed him down for a decade. He tried to join them with small gestures, wincing but persisting. Tommy appeared at the garden edge, hesitating before stepping closer. The boy had carried his own silent grief for years. Seeing his father on the grass with these girls stirred complicated feelings, but he joined in, tentatively mimicking a clumsy spin that made Lily clap with delight. In that condensed emotional stillness under the open sky, Vinny felt his physical wounds begin to mend faster than any doctor had predicted. The children's energy acted like medicine. Lily taped new drawings to the walls of his study each afternoon, colorful scenes of guardians protecting lost children. Mia, gradually warming, shared gritty Southside stories laced with humor, tales of clever escapes from trouble that revealed the sharp survival instincts these girls had honed. Sarah contributed softly, her voice timid and polite when addressing Vinny directly. "They never had space like this to play," she murmured one afternoon, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and lingering guarded curiosity. The once powerless mother felt waves of overwhelming attachment, passionate and burning toward the man who had given her daughter room to breathe. Weeks later, another unreasonable blow from the outside world tested their fragile sanctuary. During a supply trip into the city, Sarah and the children encountered a former landlord who recognized them. The man blocked their path on a busy sidewalk, loudly recounting how he had evicted those street rats and demanding they stay away from decent neighborhoods. Passersby stared, some whispering. Sarah's cheeks burned with fresh humiliation, her malnourished frame trembling as old powerlessness surged back. Dizziness swept over her, numbness creeping into her limbs. Lily and Mia stood protectively close, but it was Vinny's timely arrival that shifted the scene. A tense street confrontation unfolded, words exchanged with quiet authority. The landlord's associates lingered nearby, bold in their posturing, but Vinny's presence and subtle security backing forced them to disperse without escalation. Sarah steadied herself against the car afterward, shock and confusion swirling. "Why does the world still try to take everything?" she whispered. Vinny's inner torment deepened violently on the ride back. "My empire created ripples that hurt people like her." The paternal love for Lily, now intertwined with responsibility for Sarah and Mia, clashed harder against the ruthless decisions of his past. He sat in silence, the weight of remorse pressing until his breathing grew labored. Back at the mansion, joy returned in new forms. The garden became a daily stage. Lily taught Vinny simple drawing techniques, guiding his large hand across paper to create awkward but heartfelt images. Mia organized pretend bus stop performances, reenacting funny encounters from their homeless days with sound effects and dramatic falls that had Tommy laughing openly for the first time in months. Sarah observed these sessions with deepening trust, her heart expanding in ways she had not imagined possible. The disparity between her former life sleeping in doorways with hunger clawing at her stomach and this world of safety and play created moments of profound psychological shock. She would pause in quiet corners, tears falling silently as gratitude overwhelmed her. One golden afternoon, Vinny's physical recovery reached a milestone. Supported by Lily on one side and Mia on the other, he walked the full length of the garden path without assistance. The girls cheered wildly. Tommy joined, offering his father a rare, genuine smile. In that moment, Vinny felt deeper emotional wounds surfacing raw and exposed. The gnawing guilt over Sophie and his absent years with Tommy collided with this new fierce bond. These children are healing what I thought was dead inside me. The violent inner conflict left him breathless yet strangely lighter. Later that evening, as twilight settled over the estate, Sarah found Vinny in the study surrounded by the children's artwork. Russo had visited again, pressing for stronger action against rivals who continued probing for weakness. The conversation had been sharp, heightening tension. Sarah approached with a tray of tea, her movements still carrying echoes of street caution. "You carry too much," she said softly, her voice polite, yet laced with genuine concern. Vinny looked at her, seeing the resilient woman who had survived absolute extremity, and felt the paternal drive to protect intensify. No romance, only profound respect and responsibility that burned steadily. Mia, watching from the doorway, finally spoke more openly. "You're not like the others," she admitted grudgingly, creating a small emotional bridge. Lily beamed, pulling everyone into another silly game that filled the room with laughter. The sound echoed through halls once heavy with silence. Days blended into a rhythm of healing. Vinny's shoulder mended, but his soul felt the greater restoration. Sarah's frame filled out color, returning to her cheeks, though memories of cold, wind-filled nights and humiliating rejection still surfaced in quiet moments, tearing at her with fresh intensity. The overwhelming trust she felt toward Vinny had become a steady flame, passionate in its depth. In the garden, one crisp morning, as chalk dust colored their hands and laughter rose again, Vinny understood something profound. The daily joy these children brought was not just recovery for bodies, but a bridge across the chasm between his shadowed empire and the light they carried. Yet outside the gates, rival factions continued, circling their bold tests, growing more frequent. Another unexpected street encounter loomed on the horizon, threatening the fragile peace. For now, in this pocket of healing, 4 children and one powerful man discovered that innocence could mend what violence had broken, even as the inner tearing in every heart promised greater storms ahead. Later that night, after the laughter in the garden had faded into quiet, Vinny Moretti stood alone in his dimly lit study, the children's drawings covering the walls like vibrant shields against the darkness he had long accepted as his own. The colorful sketches of guardians and safe homes seemed to watch him, their innocence pressing against the weight of decisions waiting in the shadows. His shoulder had healed enough for normal movement, but a deeper ache had taken root, one no bandage could touch. Lily's effortless daddy echoed in his mind, each repetition carving a new path through the remorse that had defined him for so long. Next morning, the household stirred with a gentle rhythm that felt both foreign and precious. Lily bounded into Vinny's breakfast room, Mia trailing with cautious steps while Tommy followed at a distance, his young face showing the first hints of genuine curiosity. Sarah entered last, carrying a small tray. She had insisted on preparing herself despite the staff's offers. Her hands, once rough from street survival, now moved with tentative grace over porcelain that cost more than she had earned in entire years. "I wanted to do something," she said softly, her voice timid and polite as she set the tray before Vinny. The simple act carried layers of new attachment, burning with quiet intensity. Lily climbed onto the chair beside him without hesitation. "Daddy, tell us about when you were little." The question pierced Vinny unexpectedly. He spoke of rare, bright moments from his own hardscrabble Chicago youth stories he had buried beneath layers of power. As he talked, Mia listened intently, her distrust cracking further. The girl shared her own memory of a single birthday spent under a bridge, blowing out a candle stub found in trash. Sarah's eyes filled as she recalled similar nights when cold wind had stolen their breath and hope. The disparity struck everyone anew. The marble table, the warm food, the safety surrounding them, versus the absolute misery they had known. In that condensed stillness around the table, bonds deepened in ways words could barely capture. Vinny felt the paternal pull toward Lily intensify into something fierce and unbreakable. Watching her small hand rest trustingly on his arm stirred violent inner conflict. She called me daddy while surviving what my world helped create. The remorse gnawed harder, clashing against the overwhelming love that made him want to dismantle every dangerous choice he had ever made. Weeks later, during a rare outing to a quiet lakeside park under heavy security, an absurdly unfair encounter shattered the peace. A group of city officials conducting one of their routine sweeps targeted a cluster of homeless families nearby. Sarah froze as she recognized faces from her own past struggles, people she had once shared blankets with. One officer, recalling her previous pleas for help, spoke loudly about clearing out repeat offenders, his tone dripping with indifference. The humiliation crashed over Sarah like icy water. She stood powerless again, thin frame trembling dizziness, threatening to topple her as old nightmares resurfaced. Lily and Mia clung to her, their eyes wide with fresh anxiety. Vinny intervened swiftly but calmly, his commanding presence turning the officials' attention. A tense confrontation unfolded on the park path, bold words exchanged under the watchful eyes of his discreet team. The officials backed down, but the damage lingered. Sarah sat on a bench afterward, numb and disoriented, her mind reeling from the contrast, protected by immense wealth. One moment reminded of her former invisibility, the next. "They still see me as nothing," she whispered, voice soft yet heavy with inner torment. Vinny knelt before her, not as a powerful boss, but as a man carrying profound responsibility. His heart tore violently, the paternal drive to shield Lily, and these children colliding with guilt over the system his influence had indirectly sustained. Back at the mansion, the days that followed wove stronger threads of connection. Lily began teaching Vinny how to draw simple figures, guiding his hand with patient giggles. Each stroke on paper became a bridge, the child's innocent joy pulling him further from the shadows. Mia, once guarded, now organized evening storytelling circles where the children reenacted tales of street resilience turned triumphant. Tommy opened up about missing his mother and sister, his words unlocking something in Vinny that years of empire building had sealed shut. Sarah participated quietly, her overwhelming trust manifesting in small burning acts of care, such as leaving fresh flowers from the garden in Vinny's study. Her voice remained polite and measured when speaking to him, but her eyes held deepening attachment and curiosity about the man behind the power. One afternoon, Russo cornered Vinny in the hallway after a long meeting. The consigliere's words cut sharp. "You're pulling away from the streets. The captains are noticing. This family you've brought in is becoming a liability." The conversation escalated into a tense exchange of authority, though no raised voices echoed through the halls. Vinny felt the internal war rage like never before. Every instinct as a mafia boss demanded control and retaliation. Yet the laughter of Lily and Mia drifting from the garden pulled him toward a different path. Protecting them means risking everything I built. Failing them means repeating the worst failure of my life. The violent conflict left him pacing later that night, fists clenched against waves of remorse that threatened to drown him. Sarah found him in that state during a quiet evening walk along the estate's private path. She approached with hesitant steps, her malnourished past still visible in the careful way she moved, as if expecting the ground to vanish beneath her. "The children sleep better knowing you're close," she said softly, her tone carrying both gratitude and subtle fear of overstepping. In the stillness between them, Vinny shared fragments of his torment, not seeking pity but allowing her to see the weight he carried. Sarah listened, her own heart aching with the psychological shock of suddenly being valued by someone so powerful. Once desperate and humiliated on cold sidewalks, she now felt a passionate, protective attachment to this broken man's redemption, focused entirely on the father he was becoming for Lily. Days turned into deeper explorations of their shared wounds. Lily insisted on family-style dinners where everyone shared one good thing from the day. Mia's contributions grew bolder, revealing layers of street wisdom that surprised even Vinny. Tommy began defending the girls against any staff, whispers his loyalty marking a turning point. Vinny's physical presence in these moments strengthened the father-child bond with Lily until it felt like an anchor in his stormy soul. Each time the little girl hugged him goodnight, the remorse for lost years, with Sophie and Tommy, twisted sharper, yet the love that replaced it burned cleaner and stronger. Another unexpected street confrontation tested them during a discreet visit to Sarah's old neighborhood to retrieve a few sentimental items. Rivals, sensing Vinny's distraction, attempted to intimidate locals into withholding information. The encounter unfolded on a familiar corner near the sidewalk, where Lily had first drawn portraits. Bold posturing and low threats filled the air as Vinny's group arrived. Words flew tense and charged the rivals, probing for weakness. But Vinny's unyielding authority dispersed them without further incident. Sarah witnessed it all from the car, horror and anxiety gripping her until numbness followed. The absurdity of returning to her place of deepest misery while under such protection left her mind spinning in disorientation and profound emotional upheaval. In the quiet ride home, Lily leaned against Vinny, drawing idly on a notepad. "You make the scary things go away, Daddy." The simple faith in her voice intensified every internal battle within him. Vinny held her gently, the paternal love surging alongside crushing guilt. Sarah watched her trust now, a steady, intense flame that illuminated her own healing. She had gone from powerless nights, enduring wind and hunger, to standing beside true strength. Yet the transition still brought moments of numb confusion and overwhelming gratitude. The internal war within Vinny grew more consuming with each passing week. Russo's pressure mounted in private rivals, circled with bolder tests, and the Empire demanded the old, ruthless version of himself. Yet in the mansion's warm light, surrounded by drawings, laughter, and the resilient spirits of Lily, Mia, Tommy, and Sarah, a different man was emerging. The father-child bonds, especially with Lily, had become his true power, pulling him relentlessly toward choices that could either free him or cost him everything. The deepening connections offered healing, even as the war inside his heart raged louder, setting the stage for threats that loomed just beyond the gilded gates. Later that night, after the storytelling circle had dissolved into sleepy goodnights, Vinny Moretti lingered in the hallway outside the children's rooms. The soft glow of nightlights spilled beneath the doors, casting gentle patterns on the polished floors. Lily's quiet breathing carried faintly through the wood, a sound that both soothed and tormented him. The paternal bond that had grown so strong now felt like a live wire against the gathering storm outside these walls. He pressed a hand to the doorframe, the weight of his empire pressing harder than ever. Next morning, Russo requested a private meeting in the wood-paneled study overlooking the lake. The consigliere's face remained composed, but his eyes held calculated urgency. "The captains are restless," he began. "Word is spreading that you've gone soft. Sheltering street kids stepping back from collections. Rivals are already testing the edges of our territory." Vinny listened in silence, his powerful frame tense behind the massive oak desk. Every warning fed the violent conflict raging inside him. The remorse for years of ruthless control now clashed brutally with the fierce need to protect Lily, Mia, Tommy, and Sarah. "One wrong move and the darkness I created swallows them." Sarah, walking the upper gallery with Lily and Mia, overheard fragments of raised voices below. She paused, her hand tightening on the railing. The once desperate mother who had known the sting of landlords slamming doors in her face and shelters turning them away into freezing nights felt a fresh wave of anxiety. Her voice stayed soft and polite when she later asked Vinny, "Is everything all right?" But inside, old fears stirred. The luxury surrounding her only sharpened the memory of sleeping in doorways, malnourished and powerless, while wind howled mercilessly. Weeks later, the threats moved from words to action. During a routine visit to a legitimate business front in the city, Vinny's convoy encountered an unexpected roadblock. Rival crew members had positioned themselves boldly at an intersection, their vehicles angled to force a stop. Tense words flew through open windows. Accusations of weakness, demands for territory. No weapons drawn, but the confrontation crackled with menace. Vinny stepped out briefly, his commanding presence and quiet authority forcing the rivals to withdraw. Yet the message was unmistakable. His distraction had been noted. Sarah and the children waited back at the mansion, but news of the incident reached them through hushed staff conversations. When Vinny returned, Sarah met him in the foyer, her thin frame still carrying echoes of street fragility. "They're coming because of us, aren't they?" she asked, voice timid, yet laced with deepening concern. The psychological shock of being the cause of such danger left her dizzy numbness spreading through her chest as she steadied herself against a marble column. Once invisible on cold sidewalks, she now felt painfully exposed in the spotlight of his world. In the quiet, condensed stillness of his study later that afternoon, Vinny sat with Tommy. The boy had grown more protective of his new sisters, but worry etched his young face. "What if they hurt Lily?" Tommy asked. The question tore through Vinny like a fresh wound. His gnawing remorse intensified into something almost unbearable. He had built this empire to shield his family, yet it now endangered the very children healing him. The internal war escalated, leaving him pacing long after the others slept. Another absurdly unfair blow struck Sarah days afterward. While accompanying staff on a supply errand to a nearby market, she was recognized by a former caseworker who had once denied her emergency housing. The woman spoke loudly in the aisle, recounting Sarah's unstable lifestyle and questioning how someone like her had suddenly gained access to such privilege. Shoppers turned to stare. Humiliation burned through Sarah, her cheeks flushing as old powerlessness returned in full force. She stood frozen, malnourished memories flooding back nights when hunger kept her awake, while Lily shivered against her the degrading searches through trash for anything edible. Dizziness swept over her, nearly causing her to lose balance. Mia and Lily, who had insisted on joining, flanked her protectively. The unfairness of the public shaming left Sarah's inner world violently torn between gratitude for her new life and crushing doubt. Vinny arrived swiftly after a frantic call, his presence dispersing the tension with outraised voices. Yet on the ride home, Sarah sat quietly, her overwhelming trust in him now mixed with fresh fear. "I don't want to be the reason everything falls apart," she whispered, voice polite and guarded. Vinny's heart ached with profound responsibility. The paternal love for Lily burned hotter, fueling his determination even as remorse clawed deeper. As weeks passed, Russo's pressure mounted in increasingly bold ways. One evening, during a family dinner in the grand dining room, the consigliere interrupted with urgent news. Rivals had hit one of Vinny's quieter operations, sending a clear warning. Vinny excused himself, but not before Lily slipped a new drawing into his hand. A strong figure protecting a group of children under a glowing Chicago skyline. The innocent artwork intensified his inner torment. How many families have I harmed to maintain this power? Later that night, another street confrontation erupted when Vinny personally checked on a vulnerable associate. Rivals ambushed the meeting spot in an abandoned warehouse district. Bold challenges rang out in the darkness, threats laced with mockery about Vinny's new charity project. The exchange grew heated voices, echoing off concrete walls, but Vinny's unyielding calm and the swift arrival of his trusted men forced the rivals to retreat. He returned to the mansion with fresh bruises on his knuckles and deeper lines of exhaustion on his face. Sarah met him in the garden under moonlight, where the children had fallen asleep earlier, after another joyful drawing session. She approached with hesitant steps, her soft voice carrying both anxiety and burning attachment. "You keep risking yourself for us." In the stillness, Vinny allowed her a glimpse of his turmoil, speaking of the violent conflict between the boss he had been and the father he needed to become. Sarah listened, her own heart numb with the shock of sudden protection after years of absolute misery. The disparity between her past humiliation and this powerful man's sacrifices created waves of passionate gratitude that left her disoriented. Tommy, Mia, and Lily sensed the rising tension in the following days. The children grew more affectionate, Lily clinging closer during quiet moments, Mia offering street-smart observations that surprised Vinny with their wisdom. Sarah's trust had become a steady, intense force, her polite words now carrying deeper emotional weight when she urged Vinny to consider safer paths. Russo confronted Vinny again in the early hours before dawn one morning. "Choose, boss. The Empire or the strays?" The words hung heavy, escalating the internal war to a breaking point. Vinny stood alone afterward on the balcony, the glittering city lights below mirroring the empire he had built. Remorse for Sophie, for absent years with Tommy, for the pain his choices had caused innocent people like Sarah collided violently with the fierce paternal love that now defined him. The tearing in his heart felt almost physical. In a quiet moment the next evening, Sarah found him there. Lily had drawn a new family portrait earlier, including everyone under one roof. Sarah placed it gently on the balcony railing. "She believes in you," she said softly. Vinny looked at the drawing, then at Sarah, feeling the weight of responsibility like never before. His love for these children, especially Lily, burned as the one pure force in his shadowed life. The threats from the antagonist continued rising, each new confrontation pulling the fragile sanctuary closer to the edge. Rivals grew bolder, Russo more insistent, and the Empire demanded its old master back. Yet in the mansion's warm glow, the bonds between a powerful man and the vulnerable souls he now called family only strengthened, setting the stage for decisions that would either shatter everything or forge something unbreakable. The inner war raged on, more consuming than ever as shadows lengthened beyond the gilded gates. Later that night, after the children had been tucked into beds adorned with fresh drawings, Vinny Moretti reviewed security reports in his study. The lake outside the tall windows reflected the city lights like scattered diamonds, but the beauty only sharpened the shadows closing in. Russo's latest warnings still echoed, yet Vinny's thoughts kept returning to Lily's latest sketch, a sturdy house with every family member's name written carefully underneath. The paternal love he felt for her had become the single steady flame in a life of calculated darkness. Next morning, the household moved with an undercurrent of unease. Lily and Mia practiced a new dance routine in the sunlit atrium, their laughter bouncing off high ceilings. Tommy joined half-heartedly, his protective instincts toward his sisters growing daily. Sarah helped coordinate the movements, her once frail frame now stronger. Though the memory of nights spent huddled against biting lake winds still surfaced unbidden, she glanced toward Vinny when he entered, offering a soft, polite smile. "They wanted to show you their new steps," she said, voice carrying the deepening attachment that had become her quiet anchor. The peace shattered without warning in the late afternoon. Russo, driven by his growing fear of losing influence, had secretly fed information to a rival faction. Multiple vehicles breached the outer perimeter under the cover of a delivery truck. Alarms blared through the mansion as armed men moved swiftly toward the main house. The home invasion unfolded with calculated menace rather than chaos. Shouts echoed through corridors. Vinny rushed from his study, heart pounding with a new, visceral terror unlike any he had known in years of street conflicts. "Get the children to the safe room," he ordered, his powerful voice cutting through the panic. Sarah grabbed Lily and Mia, pulling them toward the reinforced wing. Tommy stayed close to his father, refusing to leave. In the grand hallway, the rivals confronted them directly. Bold demands rang out, accusations of Vinny's weakness, threats to make an example. Tension thickened the air as Vinny positioned himself as a shield, his commanding presence forcing a momentary standoff. No wild gunfire erupted, but the threat felt suffocating. Then Lily broke free from Sarah's grasp. The little girl had doubled back, clutching her latest drawing like a talisman. "Daddy," she cried, running toward him just as one rival raised a weapon in a threatening gesture. Sarah lunged after her daughter. In that heart-stopping instant, Lily threw herself in front of Vinny. A single shot cracked, grazing the child's arm. Lily cried out in pain, but remained upright, small hand still reaching for her father. The world narrowed for Vinny. He caught Lily as she stumbled, blood staining her sleeve. Horror and a father's anguish crashed through him with violent force. He roared commands that sent his men surging forward. The rivals, realizing they had crossed an unforgivable line, retreated under the pressure of Vinny's security team. The confrontation ended in tense withdrawal rather than slaughter, but the damage was done. Sarah reached them moments later, dropping to her knees beside her daughter. "Lily, baby, stay with us." Her voice remained soft, even through raw fear, though inside she felt extreme psychological shock. Dizziness swept over her, numbness spreading from her fingertips as she pressed a cloth to Lily's wound. The absurdity tore at her soul after surviving absolute poverty, sleeping in doorways where cold wind cut like blades, and hunger gnawed endlessly. Her child now bled because of the safety she had finally found. Confusion and burning attachment to Vinny warred violently with fresh horror. They rushed Lily to a private medical facility under Vinny's control. In the sterile room, as doctors treated the shallow graze, Vinny held his daughter's small hand. The paternal love he felt surged with overwhelming intensity, nearly breaking him. Tommy stood beside him, pale and silent. Mia, eyes wide with lingering distrust, now mixed with fierce loyalty, whispered, "She saved you." Later that night, while Lily rested under medication, the full family revelation unfolded in a quiet hospital suite. Sarah sat beside Vinny, her thin frame trembling from the day's events. She finally spoke the truth she had carried for years. "I never told you about Lily because I was terrified of your world. After we met briefly all those years ago, I learned who you really were. I hid her to keep her safe from the very dangers that found us anyway." Her voice stayed timid and polite, yet each word carried profound emotional weight. She revealed how Sophie's death had been tied to early rivalries sparked by Vinny's rise, information she had pieced together through street whispers while struggling alone. Vinny listened, his fair-skinned face drained of color. The gnawing remorse that had lived in him for a decade exploded into something far more devastating. "My own blood has suffered because of the empire I built to protect my family." The violent inner conflict left him numb, then breathless. He had failed Sophie. He had unknowingly failed Lily. The paternal bond, already fierce, now burned with a depth that consumed every other part of him. Tears he had not shed in years tracked down his cheeks as he looked at Sarah with profound respect and shared pain. Mia, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped forward. The tough street girl, once so distrustful, spoke with surprising clarity. "You're different. You didn't throw us away. You stayed even when it got dangerous." Her words, born from years of seeing powerful men discard children like them, became an emotional turning point. She looked at Vinny with new eyes, bridging the final gap of suspicion. Sarah reached for Mia's hand, the three of them forming a circle of quiet, condensed stillness around Lily's bed. In the early hours before dawn, as monitors beeped softly, Vinny sat alone with his thoughts while Sarah rested nearby. The disparity between his immense wealth, the mansion waiting empty and luxurious, and the pitiful reality Sarah had endured, hit him with fresh force. He pictured her malnourished and sleep-deprived, enduring humiliating nights on concrete while protecting their daughter. The remorse clawed deeper, tearing his heart in ways he had never imagined possible. Yet alongside it burned an unshakable resolve he would choose them. The father he was becoming for Lily mattered more than any empire. Sarah woke briefly and found him there. "You're not alone in this anymore," she whispered, her overwhelming trust now a passionate, steady force. The psychological shift from desperate street survivor to protected mother still brought moments of disorientation. but the attachment she felt toward Vinny's protective heart had become unbreakable. Tommy entered quietly, joining them. The boy placed a hand on his father's shoulder. "We're a family now, all of us." The simple declaration intensified every emotion in the room. Vinny pulled his son close, the paternal love extending fully to all the children who had healed him. By the following afternoon, Lily had stabilized enough to smile weakly when they gathered around her. She reached for Vinny's hand. "I knew you'd keep us safe, Daddy." The words spoken through pain solidified the life-threatening sacrifice into something sacred. Vinny's inner world continued to fracture and reform, the violent conflict between his old life and this new one reaching its peak. The second major twist had cost them dearly, yet it had also revealed the full truth. Blood sacrifice and unwavering loyalty had bound them tighter than any empire ever could. As they prepared to return to the mansion under heightened security, Vinny understood that the real war was no longer outside the gates. It was the one inside his soul, where remorse and redemption battled for the future of the family he now refused to lose. The shadows of danger still loomed, but in that hospital room, a powerful man had crossed a threshold from which there was no returning. The father-child bond with Lily, strengthened through blood and bravery, had become his guiding light through the gathering storm. Later that night, with Lily's arm bandaged and the mansion under heavy guard, Vinny Moretti sat vigil beside her bed. The child's steady breathing offered the only peace he could claim. Sarah rested in the chair across from him, her hand lightly touching Lily's. The quiet, condensed stillness in the room felt sacred after the invasion, yet Vinny's mind churned with unrelenting force. The paternal love that had nearly consumed him during the shooting now burned with even greater urgency. Next morning, as pale sunlight filtered through reinforced windows, Lily woke with a small but determined smile. "I'm okay, Daddy. Can we go outside soon? Mia wants to draw by the lake again." Her courage, even in recovery, chipped further at Vinny's resolve. Russo had been unusually silent since the attack, which only heightened Vinny's suspicion. Still believing the immediate threat had passed and craving normalcy for the children, Vinny agreed to a carefully supervised outing to a private lakeside clearing just beyond the estate. Weeks later, the day arrived under a crisp blue sky. Security teams swept the area twice. Lily, Mia, and Tommy piled into an armored vehicle, with Sarah excitement bubbling despite the precautions. Vinny rode in the lead car, watching them through the rearview mirror. For the first time in months, the children's laughter felt unshadowed. Lily sketched clouds while Mia pointed out ducks on the water. Sarah sat between them, her voice soft and polite as she reminded them to stay close. "This is a gift," she murmured, her overwhelming trust in Vinny now, a deep burning constant. The peace shattered in a single calculated moment. As the children ran ahead toward the water's edge under watchful eyes, a second team men Vinny had once trusted moved in with brutal efficiency. Russo's betrayal had been meticulously planned. The supposed security detail turned, subduing the loyal guards with minimal struggle and seizing Lily and Mia. Tommy was pulled back just in time, but the girls vanished into waiting vans before alarms could fully sound. Sarah's scream pierced the air as she lunged forward, only to be restrained. Dizziness slammed into her like a wave. Numbness spread through her limbs as the world tilted. After surviving years of absolute poverty, enduring wind-lashed nights on concrete where hunger made every breath painful and humiliation stripped her of dignity, this new loss felt like the cruelest twist yet. "Not my baby," she whispered, voice breaking. Vinny's convoy raced to the scene. When he learned of the kidnapping, a roar of primal paternal fury tore through him. Russo. My own blood taken by the man I trusted. The violent inner conflict exploded into something blinding. Remorse for every decision that had allowed such betrayal now mixed with a father's terror so intense it nearly paralyzed him. He mobilized every loyal resource, his powerful empire turning inward with cold precision. Hours stretched into a nightmare. Sarah paced the mansion, her thin frame trembling with fresh horror and anxiety. Memories of powerless nights, begging strangers for scraps, watching Lily shiver under threadbare blankets resurfaced with vicious clarity. The luxury around her now felt mocking a gilded cage that could not protect what mattered most. Confusion and deep disorientation left her unsteady on her feet, leaning against walls as waves of psychological shock crashed over her. Yet her attachment to Vinny only intensified a passionate lifeline in the chaos. Meanwhile, in a remote warehouse on the industrial edge of the city, Lily and Mia sat bound but unharmed in a dimly lit room. Russo had not anticipated the girl's resilience. Lily, despite her bandaged arm, began drawing on a scrap of paper with a small pencil stub she had hidden. She drew simple pictures of kind faces and offered them to the low-level guards watching them. "You don't look happy," she said softly to one younger man. "My daddy says everyone deserves a chance to be good." Her innocent kindness, born from years of sidewalk survival, stirred something in the guard. He had joined Russo's plot for money, not this. Mia whispered warnings at first, her street-honed distrust flaring. Don't trust any of them. But as hours passed, Lily's calm courage began to shift, even her best friend. Then came the buried secret. While the guards argued in the next room, Lily noticed a small recording device left on a table. Curious, she pressed play. Russo's voice filled the space coldly, ordering the car bomb that had killed Sophie years earlier. Not rival action, but internal betrayal to consolidate power. The revelation hit Lily like cold water. She clutched the device, eyes wide with shock. Later that night, Vinny's rescue team located the warehouse through frantic intelligence. The operation unfolded with tense precision. Vinny led from the front, his commanding presence cutting through the darkness. A bold confrontation erupted at the perimeter as rival remnants loyal to Russo tried to block entry. Sharp words and strategic positioning forced their retreat without chaos, but every second away from Lily tore at Vinny's soul. Inside the warehouse, the young guard Lily had spoken to made his choice. He turned on the others, unlocking the room and helping the girls escape toward Vinny's approaching team. The reunion in the warehouse corridor was raw and shattering. Vinny dropped to his knees as Lily ran into his arms, the recording device clutched tightly in her small hand. "Daddy, he did it. The bad man hurt your other daughter," she whispered, pressing the device into his palm. Vinny listened to the recording, his world fracturing completely. The gnawing remorse that had haunted him for a decade now had to face his own consigliere. The violent inner conflict reached its most devastating peak. "I brought this poison into my house. My choices cost Sophie her life and nearly cost me Lily." Tears streamed down his face as he held his daughter, the paternal love surging with such force it felt like it might consume him entirely. Sarah arrived moments later, collapsing beside them. She pulled both girls close, her body shaking with relief and fresh horror. The psychological toll of the kidnapping, layered atop years of humiliating poverty, left her numb and disoriented. Once, a powerless woman enduring sleep-deprived nights in alleys where wind stole every comfort, she now clung to the powerful man who had upended her world. Her trust had become an all-consuming flame, passionate in its depth, and focused entirely on the father protecting her child. Mia, still processing, looked at Vinny with transformed eyes. "She saved us with her drawings, just like she saved you." The street-tough girl's voice cracked, revealing the deeper truth about disadvantaged children, their invisible pain, their quiet strength. Tommy, safe but shaken, joined the embrace, completing the circle. In the condensed emotional stillness of the warehouse, surrounded by loyal men securing the area, Vinny broke. He confessed fragments of his past sins to Sarah, not seeking absolution but sharing the weight. The disparity between his immense wealth and the utter misery Sarah and the girls had endured struck him with renewed force. He pictured Sarah malnourished and desperate on Chicago streets, and the image nearly brought him to his knees again. Back at the mansion hours later, as dawn approached, the family gathered in Lily's room. The child, exhausted but resolute, drew a new picture, a broken chain with light breaking through. Vinny held it, the paternal bond with Lily, now forged in fire and truth. His inner tearing had never been more intense, remorse for the bomb, guilt for the empire, love so fierce it demanded total change. Yet in Lily's trusting eyes he found the strength to face it. The shocking twist had exposed the deepest betrayal and the greatest secret. Russo's treachery was laid bare. A guard had turned because of a child's kindness. And Vinny Moretti, the powerful Mafia boss, had been brought to his knees not by enemies but by the innocent heart of the daughter he had unknowingly failed and now vowed never to lose again. The war was far from over, but the buried truth had changed everything. In the quiet after the storm, 4 children and 1 broken man stood closer than ever, their bonds the only light strong enough to pierce the gathering shadows. Later that night, after the warehouse rescue and the shattering revelation of Russo's betrayal, Vinny Moretti stood on the mansion balcony, overlooking the dark lake. The recording device lay heavy in his pocket like a live coal. Lily slept inside, safe but forever changed. The paternal love that had carried him through the kidnapping now demanded something greater than revenge. It demanded justice, even if it meant burning his empire to the ground. Next morning, federal agents arrived at the gates under heavy escort. The evidence Vinny provided, combined with the recording, had triggered an immediate investigation. Russo was already in custody, but the net was widening. Vinny faced an impossible crossroads: silence to preserve his power or full cooperation that would dismantle everything he had built. Sarah stood beside him in the foyer, as the agents waited, her voice soft and polite, yet steady. "Whatever you choose, we stand with you." Her overwhelming trust, forged through blood and fear, burned with quiet intensity. The once powerless woman who had endured years of humiliating poverty now offered strength to the most powerful man she had ever known. Weeks later, the high-stakes federal trial began in a downtown Chicago courthouse under extraordinary security. Vinny had chosen to testify. The decision had torn him apart in private, the gnawing remorse for a lifetime of shadows colliding violently with the father he refused to betray again. Sarah and the children waited in a protected room, Lily's small hand clutching a new drawing she had made for the day, a courtroom where light broke through chains. Inside the packed courtroom, tension crackled like electricity. Vinny took the stand, his fair-skinned face composed yet etched with visible strain. As he spoke, detailing years of operations and naming names, the empire he had ruled began crumbling in real time, each word carved deeper into his soul. This is the cost of protecting them. The violent inner conflict left him breathless between answers, remorse for Sophie for Lily's suffering, and for every family his choices had harmed surging like a storm. Sarah watched through a secure feed, her heart aching with profound empathy. Memories of her own desperate nights flooded back, sleeping on freezing sidewalks where wind sliced through thin blankets, begging for food while Lily grew thinner. The constant humiliation of being invisible to a world that punished the poor. The contrast with the marble courtroom and Vinny's commanding presence created waves of psychological shock. She felt dizzy, numbness spreading as gratitude and fear intertwined. Once powerless and guarded, she now witnessed the man who had rescued them, risking everything. Lily was called to testify under special protections for minors. The little girl walked to the stand with quiet courage, her bandaged arm a visible reminder of sacrifice. The courtroom fell into hushed stillness. In a small, clear voice, she spoke not of violence, but of healing. My daddy used to carry so much sadness. But kids like me and Mia and Tommy can fix broken hearts if grown-ups let us. He chose us over the bad things. Her innocent words, delivered with sidewalk wisdom and pure kindness, moved jurors and spectators alike. Mia followed her tough exterior cracking as she described the invisible pain of street children, the nights of cold wind and hunger, and how one man's protection had given them hope. Tommy's testimony sealed the emotional weight, speaking of a father rediscovering his heart. Sarah sat in the waiting room afterward, tears falling silently. The absurdity of her journey struck with fresh force from malnourished and sleep-deprived on Chicago streets, enduring degrading rejection after rejection, to watching her daughter stand in a federal courtroom changing lives. Confusion and deep attachment left her disoriented, yet the burning trust she felt for Vinny anchored her. Later that afternoon, as the trial recessed, an assassination attempt unfolded in the courthouse parking garage. Russo's remaining loyalists had infiltrated despite security. As the family moved toward armored vehicles, a gunman emerged from behind a pillar weapon raised toward Lily. Time slowed. Vinny saw the threat and threw himself forward without hesitation. "Lily," he shouted, his powerful frame shielding his daughter completely. The shot rang out, striking Vinny in the chest. Pain exploded through him as he crumpled, pulling Lily down safely beneath him. Chaos erupted in controlled bursts. Security swarmed, subduing the attacker in a tense, rapid confrontation of commands and positioning. No further shots fired. Sarah reached them first, dropping to her knees in horror. "No, not you," she whispered, her voice timid, yet breaking with raw fear. She pressed her hands to Vinny's wound, blood staining her fingers. Dizziness and numbness crashed over her as the scene blurred. After surviving absolute poverty, the thought of losing the man who had become their protector tore through her inner world with violent intensity. Lily clung to her father, sobbing softly. Mia and Tommy formed a protective circle, their faces pale with shock. In the ambulance racing toward the hospital, Vinny drifted in and out of consciousness, his hand gripping Lily's. "You are worth every sacrifice," he managed, voice weak but fierce with paternal love. The remorse that had haunted him reached its zenith. "I would give it all again." The violent emotional upheaval left him numb, then flooded with clarity. His empire, his power, his past, none of it mattered compared to this child's safety and the family healing him. Sarah rode beside him, holding his other hand. Her overwhelming attachment had become something profound and unbreakable. A passionate force centered entirely on the father who had chosen them. The disparity between her former life of utter misery and this moment of shared sacrifice created extreme psychological shock. She felt lost, then found in the depth of emotion tearing through her. At the hospital, in the condensed emotional stillness of the waiting area, the children gathered around Sarah. Lily drew quietly, creating an image of her father as a shield of light. Mia spoke softly of the deeper truths street children carried, how kindness could turn even the hardest hearts. Tommy leaned against Sarah, finding comfort in the new family bond. Hours blurred as doctors worked. Sarah paced her mind, reeling between horror at the shooting and burning gratitude for Vinny's choice. The unfairness of it all, after everything they had endured, nearly broke her. Yet it also strengthened her trust into something unshakable. When the surgeon finally emerged with news that Vinny would survive, relief washed through the room like dawn after endless night. Sarah allowed herself a quiet sob, the sound carrying years of pent-up torment from powerless nights, enduring cold wind and hunger. Lily's innocent message in court combined with Vinny's ultimate sacrifice had not only swayed the trial, but had completed a transformation no one could have predicted. Later that night in the recovery room, Vinny opened his eyes to find his family surrounding him. Lily climbed carefully onto the bed's edge, placing her drawing on his chest. "You saved me, Daddy, just like I knew you would." The paternal bond tested by fire and blood shone with unbreakable strength. Vinny looked at Sarah, seeing the resilient woman who had survived the worst and still offered hope. His inner world, once torn by remorse and conflict, now held a new center, complete devotion to these children, and the mother who had raised his daughter through hell. The ultimate twist had cost him dearly, yet it had given him everything that truly mattered. The trial continued without him, but the testimony and his sacrifice had shattered the old organization beyond repair. In the quiet beeps of monitors and the soft breathing of his family, Vinny understood the final truth. True power had never been in empires. It lived in the small hands that had healed him, and the love willing to stand between danger and innocence. The road ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time in years, Vinny Moretti faced it not as a mafia boss, but as a father, ready to build something lasting from the ashes. Later that night, in the quiet glow of the hospital recovery room, Vinny Moretti lay listening to the steady rhythm of monitors while his family slept nearby. The bullet had missed vital organs by a fraction, but the real healing ran far deeper. For the first time in years, the powerful mafia boss felt the weight of his empire lift, replaced by something lighter and infinitely more precious. Sarah sat vigil beside him, her hand resting gently on his arm. The rescued woman, who had once known only desperation and cold, wind-filled nights, now offered silent strength that anchored him through the pain. Next morning, as sunlight streamed through the blinds, Lily climbed carefully onto the bed and placed a new drawing on Vinny's chest. It showed their family standing together in a simple house, no gates or guards, just open windows and laughter. "We're going home for real this time, Daddy," she whispered. Vinny's fair-skinned face softened as he pulled her close. The paternal bond forged through danger and sacrifice burned with complete devotion. Tommy and Mia gathered around, completing the circle. In that condensed emotional stillness, Vinny made his final choice. He would testify, fully dismantle what remained of his organization, and enter a protected new life far from the shadows. Weeks later, after the trial concluded with sweeping convictions, Vinny emerged from the hospital into witness protection. The family left the Gold Coast mansion behind, trading its marble halls and guarded luxury for a modest suburban home on the outskirts of Chicago. The contrast struck Sarah most powerfully. She walked through the simple rooms with tears in her eyes, remembering the absolute extremity of her former poverty, thin and malnourished, sleep-deprived, enduring, humiliating nights on concrete, where wind whipped mercilessly, and every stranger's glance carried judgment. Now, surrounded by warmth and safety, she felt profound gratitude mixed with lingering disorientation. The disparity between her past misery and this new reality still brought moments of numb wonder. Vinny, no longer the untouchable boss, but a man rebuilding with honest work, spent his days teaching the children simple skills. He helped Lily with her drawings, listened to Mia's street stories, and played catch with Tommy in the backyard. Each ordinary moment intensified the inner tearing in his heart, but now it was a tearing of old chains breaking away. The gnawing remorse for his past slowly transformed into quiet determination to be the father they deserved. Sarah watched him with deepening attachment, her voice soft and polite when she said, "You chose us over everything." That kind of love knows no boundaries of skin color or bank accounts. One golden afternoon, while the children played in the driveway with sidewalk chalk, an unexpected visitor arrived, a representative from a local community center. They had heard fragments of the family's story and offered support programs. Vinny accepted humbly, recognizing that true wealth meant giving back. In helping other families facing poverty, he found new purpose. Sarah joined him in these efforts, sharing her journey from powerless streets to protected mother. The experience brought fresh psychological depth, reminding her how compassion could bridge any divide between wealth and poverty. Months later, during a quiet evening on the porch, Vinny reflected deeply with Sarah. The children's laughter drifted from inside the house. He spoke of the knowledge gained through suffering, the knowledge that real strength lies in vulnerability, the knowledge that every child carries hidden light, the knowledge that healing comes through connection, and the knowledge that love transcends all barriers. Sarah listened, her heart swelling with the realization that wealth and poverty could never separate genuine compassion. This lesson in humanity had reshaped them. All this lesson in resilience had given them new beginnings. This lesson in forgiveness had freed Vinny's soul. This lesson in courage had united the family, and this lesson in hope now guided their days. Through it all, the education of the heart proved more valuable than any empire. The education of kindness healed old wounds. The education of family mended what violence had broken. The education of empathy opened closed doors, and the education of unconditional love created their forever home. Lily approached then, holding a large family portrait drawn on the driveway. "We're all different colors on the outside," she said innocently, "but inside we're the same." Vinny knelt beside her, tears glistening as he traced the figures. The paternal bond with his daughter had become the center of his world. He no longer carried the violent conflict of his old life. Instead, a fierce protective fatherhood filled every corner of his being. Sarah placed her hand on his shoulder. The overwhelming surge of love she felt for this man as protector and father, burning with pure intensity. Their connection, born from the streets and sealed through trial, proved that neither wealth nor poverty could diminish true compassion. In the following days, the family embraced small, meaningful routines. Vinny worked at a community outreach program using his past experiences to guide others away from darkness. Sarah found quiet strength helping at a local shelter, offering the understanding only someone who had endured such misery could provide. The children thrived in school and play their laughter, filling the modest home with light. Each shared meal, each bedtime story, each drawing session deepened the father-child bonds, especially between Vinny and Lily, whose innocent kindness had sparked the entire journey of redemption. As seasons changed, Vinny stood in the backyard, one crisp evening watching Lily, Mia, and Tommy chase fireflies. Sarah joined him, and in the quiet, condensed stillness, he whispered, "I thought I had everything before, but I had nothing until I learned what family truly means." The inner turmoil that once raged had settled into profound peace, replaced by gratitude for the second chance these resilient souls had given him. This story carries powerful life lessons for all of us. It reminds us that the greatest knowledge comes not from power but from the hearts of children. It teaches us that every lesson in compassion can transform even the hardest soul. Through the education of love, we discover that skin color and social status mean nothing when hearts connect. Another lesson shines brightly: true wealth is measured in kindness, not in riches. And the education of forgiveness allows us to build new futures from broken pasts. May we all carry this knowledge forward, embracing each lesson with open hearts and seeking the education that matters most, the education of humanity itself. To everyone watching this video, we wish you good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with others so we can bring many more engaging videos every day. How did this story make you feel? Does it connect with moments in your own real life? Please share your thoughts in the comments below so the creator can listen to the emotions from deep within your hearts. Your words mean everything to us. Thank you for watching. We promise to see you again in the next video. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.